Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala nabiyyina Muhammad. Today, as we continue on the 17th Hadith, we have the Hadith of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم سباب المسلم فسوق وقتاله كفر. This hadith, which is in Al-Bukhari, we have Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam telling us that sibab al-muslimi fusuq. Sibab is perhaps looked at as being the plural of sab, but also what's mentioned with regards to this is that it's an exaggerated form of sab. Well, what is sab? Sab in the Arabic is the verbal abuse that is directed towards someone. It includes everything of calling a person names, of saying hurtful words, of cursing them. So sibab in that case would actually go even a step beyond, where not only is it calling a person names, saying hurtful words, cursing them, but it then takes also into consideration saying things that are not truthful about them, slandering them, and all sorts of other things that only further add hurt and insult to injury. This is something that the Prophet ﷺ tells us that this is fusuq. When we look at the word fusuq, it is the plural of fisq. Well, what is fisq? Fisq is to transgress Allah's limits. It is to go above and beyond what Allah has allowed. So, if we think about sibabul muslimi fusuq, the Prophet ﷺ is telling us that it's not just one transgression, but it is in essence really so many of Allah's rules and regulations being transgressed, being broken. This is to even further help emphasize for us the seriousness of how words, when they are not controlled in a way that is correct with Allah Azza wa Jal, how they can easily lead a person to transgress what Allah has made permissible in so many different ways, such that it can actually count against the person, the one who is saying these things, in ways that perhaps they may have not imagined. One of the things that we can also recognize within this hadith is the next step of it, the next part of it, which says وَقِتَالُهُ كُفْرٌ. Qital, it means to fight, but it also brings to light that it's the root letters for qatala, which means to kill. So it's to fight someone with the intention of hurting them, to even kill them. So to fight against another Muslim with the intention of wanting to harm them and to kill them is kufr. And we all understand what kufr means. In its linguistic terms, it means to be ungrateful to Allah, to reject Allah, His blessing, and whatever else it may be, and to not acknowledge what Allah would otherwise ask us to acknowledge and to be grateful for. But in addition to that, it also has the Islamic meaning of to disbelieve, to reject. What are we talking about? To disbelieve in what Allah has taught us about the sacredness of a Muslim, one towards the other. And it also is referring to rejecting what the Prophet ﷺ had embodied of Islam's teachings, of what the Quran itself teaches. Allah Azza wa Jal makes it clear in the Quran saying, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وما كان لمؤمن أن يقتل مؤمنا إلا خطأ, that it is not appropriate or acceptable that a believer would kill another believer except that it happens by mistake. And then Allah Azza wa Jal, continuing within these ayat, He says, وَمَن يَقْتُلْ مُؤْمِنًا مُتَعَمِّدًا فَجَزَاؤُهُ جَهَنَّمُ خَالِدًا فِيهَا وَغَضِبَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَلَعَنَهُ وَأَعَدَّ لَهُ عَذَابًا عَظِيمًا. Allah the Exalted then says, and whoever kills a believer intentionally, then their consequence will be, or their punishment will be hell forever, that they will be in there. And that Allah has cursed them, and that Allah is angry with them, and He has prepared for them a tremendous punishment. When we look at the sum total of what Rasulullah ﷺ is telling us here, we come to recognize that there's an inference here of how we need to pay attention to our thoughts, to guard our thoughts. Because it is through our thoughts that our feelings and emotions are then affected. If a person is to harbor a thought, which is a thought from shaitan, where they will dislike, where they will even hate another Muslim, then it becomes easier for shaitan to harbor that anger within them, which is then going to be manifested in what this hadith teaches us of a person verbally then saying things to the other or about the other that will most of the time transgress the limits of what Allah has laid, and is going to be a direct transgression against Allah Azza wa Jal and of what the Prophet ﷺ in his beautiful sunnah has taught us. And if a person can reach that point where they're able to manifest their anger and their hatred towards another slave and servant of Allah by swearing at them and cursing them and calling them all sorts of names and hurting their feelings and being verbally abusive, and beyond that saying things that are not true, then it only takes just a little bit more for shaitan to push that person such that they're going to then physically seek to act things out. Where in that physicalness, that it can cause an altercation, where then people are going to get their hands, involved, and there's going to be physical fighting. And in that process, it could also lead to a point where there's going to be weapons involved. And when there's weapons involved, even when there's not weapons involved, but when there's weapons involved, the case of a person being killed is something that's not too far-fetched. And if this is something that does happen, Allah's Prophet ﷺ is teaching us that this is rejecting what Allah has told us, that the Muslim is sacred, that their blood is sacred, that their honor and reputation is sacred, as well as their wealth and their belongings. And we hope and pray that Allah Azza wa Jal can help us to always discern between shaitan's evil whispers to us that cause us to think the wrong thoughts and to stir up within us ill emotions of feelings of hatred and anger towards our brothers and sisters, such that then it can also lead us to act in a way that will cause us to perhaps doom ourselves in this world before being ultimately doomed in the hereafter. We ask Allah that He help us to purify our thoughts, to purify our hearts and souls for us, and to bless us to have the sweetest of speech and the best of manners, that being the speech and manners of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who was the best of the best, the absolute finest role model that anyone can ever hope to emulate, who should be the ultimate source that each and everyone who declares La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah to be the pinnacle of their role model that they want to emulate, the source whom they want to live by as best as possible in his footsteps, both in their beliefs as well as in their actions. Allahumma ameen. Wa salli Allahumma ala nabiyyina Muhammad. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.